Right. Louha is an Arabic word which describes a plank of wood on which parchment, vellum, whatever, is glued, and on which an important document is written. In this case, size of the Louha was about this. It was a normal plank of cedar wood, and it was goat skin as parchment. It is thanks to the Louha that Champagne came to finally happen in Epernay, because one monk from Spain went to the monastery of Auvillers, close to Epernay, and brought a Louha on which he had his prayers in Latin. And the plank of wood was not wood, but was of bark, the bark of a cork tree. And the blind monk Dumbrill said, "Oh, this seems to be very light and very flexible." And he nicked a bit of it, making a cork, and that was it. It was the way, it is thanks to that champagne could be kept in the bottle without having leaks of gas and liquid. So this is an interesting relation. Now, this Louha of al-Wanshini, al-Wanshini is the man who wrote the Louha. This document is extremely controversial. The famous musicologist George Henry Farmer, who died in '62, would have seen it in Morocco whilst in 1929. He was having a tour in Morocco as a musicologist. And according to the legend, he was shown this Louha as he was boarding the ferry to go to Spain and then sail back to England. Or I don't remember if the boat was going directly from Tangiers to England, which is quite probable. Anyway, it is said that he saw the manuscript of the Louha for a while, but he didn't have the time to either buy it or to take notes. It was said that he mentioned the Louha in his writings. However, I haven't seen traces of it, which is strange because one of my gurus, Abdullah Scott, who was the son of a famous Victorian painter, extremely wealthy family, who had a huge villa in Tangier, where one of the James Bond films was shot actually, and other superb places in France and Spain and in Cambridge. My guru, Michael Scott, was sharing a room at, it was at Cambridge, or at Oxford, it was in Cambridge, with George Henry Farmer, and inherited of all of Henry Farmer's notes and bits and pieces. These notes came into my hands, and I could have a complete look at what was never published by Farmer, and I never saw anywhere the mention of this document. So we start by a kind of legend about it, which makes the tablet a bit suspicious straight away. It was also said that Farmer would have mentioned this Louha in an article that he wrote later in the 30s called Lord Moorish Tutor. I have this article, which is not easy to find. I managed to get a copy of it, and there's absolutely no mention of this Louha. So it's all a bit suspicious. However, today it's not a question of saying, I'm just presenting the tablet, the document, and simply to leave it to our appreciation to see if there is, if it might be a fake or not a fake. If it is a fake, why is it a fake? If it's not a fake, why it is not a fake? And what are the other alternatives? But to start with, I would like to have a look with you at the general situation and its contents, and then we can go in an analysis of the Louha. This, to start with, is the place where I was living in Fez, which is the headquarters of the foundation on which I was director, called Dar al-Hadara, the House of Culture. This is a magnificent courtyard which dates from the 16th century. and around which a quantity of rooms are built, and other houses growing organically around this major house. The room at the front that you see here is a huge kuba, in Arabic kuba, which gave us the word alcove in English, alcova in Spanish, which could host about 800 people. The rooms to the left and the right used to host my seminars of architecture, where we had 20 girls, 20 boys working on projects, of architectural projects in the University of Fez. All these students were young graduates of architecture from different countries in the world. And further down, we have a very magnificent corridor looking on the University of Fez with a beautiful scenery. Many painters used to come there and ask permission to do landscapes of the city. And down below, a huge garden, as we shall see in a second, and other buildings to the right and to the left. During my musical festival, which I held there, I used to have about 1,500 people every night for a fortnight. We had the kitchens, the catering, and everything was there. This is the house is no longer under the hands of our foundation. It has been bought back by another organization, and it has been restored again to its former glory. This is the setting of where it happened when, what are we speaking about? Okay, this is me in the 90s in the gardens with a young chap, student, helping us. To the left, to the left of these gardens was the dining room, which could host 250 people quite nicely. And there we have these bitter oranges, 7 oranges, and to the right, the huge garden. This, you cannot see it very well, was the major room, the 16 meters to the top. Very problematic when you have to change a bulb. It was a bit of a problem. All made of cedar wood and all painted with floral ornamentation. And then I make a pause because I want to speak a bit more about this house. This house, which is called Paris by the French, but in Arabic it has the name Dar, and these big houses have the name of the owners. So this was Dar al-Makri. Makri had been the prime minister of King Mohammed V, father of Hassan II, therefore grandfather of the present king of Morocco. This guy had an ancestor who was called al-Hayek. No, sorry, this guy had an ancestor who sponsored a writer called al-Hayek to write down the 11 Nauba, which is a style of music in Morocco, classical style. And this is where the 11 Nauba have been written in the 17th century. So there's a link immediately between the house and music. Now, al-Hayek has two meanings. The meaning of the guy who wrote the 12 and the 11 Nauba, but it also means the veil, and the veil was the veil that separated musicians from the amorous engagements of the big boss of the house and his concubines or whatever mistresses he might have had. So the Hayek is the veil to hide music from the debates, amorous debates on the other side. So it was the ideal place for starting an institute of musicology. This is what we did. So here we are in 1982, and here's my friend Abderrahman Finish, remarkably gifted surgeon who has trained in Russia. So he is fluent in Russian. He speaks German, Spanish, French, English, Spanish I said, and Arabic obviously. He is this kind of highly intellectual Muslim scholars who indulges in writing poetry, in playing music, in composing operas, in many things, and has the time to operate numerous patients in his private clinic. God knows when does he sleep, we do not know. He's married, but he's got another house where he welcomes his musician friends and they play music all night, and this type of life. He is a very good Muslim, but he doesn't exhibit it. Simply doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, and he's got this kind of, typical Muslim scholar, extremely gifted, extremely polymathic. It is in this house that I received in '82 a phone call. Richard, come straight away to Rabat. I say, why? What's happening? I say, come straight away to Rabat. I've got something to show you. It's very important. So, are you joking? I have to go to get the car and drive. And at the time, the road from Fez to Rabat was not especially good road. I decided to go there, and he shows me in great excitement this Louha. I said, what the hell is that? He said, it's a Louha, and how did you get it? The story is that he was in his consultation room and had the visit of one of his old patients who was quite old, and he entered in my friend's consultation room and said to my friend, did you do your prayers today? And my friend, although good Muslim, said, that's it, another lunatic, He's asking me if I did my prayers, I have other things to do. And he said, well, go and do your ablutions and let's pray together. So Abdu, being very kind and very, decides to do his ablutions and takes his prayer cup, patrols it down, and off they pray. And he said, you remember me? Abdu could not remember him. He said, you operated me from a cancer 10 years ago. I'm cured, I'm very healthy. I married another wife, nice, 18 years old, and have made more children, so I'm very happy. And I read an article about you in the newspapers, and because you are involved with music, I've got something for you. And from his jalaba, he gives my friend Abdurrahman this Louha. Straight away, this myth about Farmer having seen it in 29 comes back to my mind, and I'm trying to think who told this story to me. Anyway, there's a kind of story which was known about this document. We translate it. It is difficult to read because the ink has faded somehow. It's written in sepia, which is the ink of the octopus, and it is not that readable. Okay, here it is. Now, what does it say? As obviously, it starts by being an Islamic country by a religious introduction, which is the top there. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi. Okay, it's in the name of God, the merciful, the most clever, and all, and so forth. And it's Ikra, which in Arabic means read. And in the name of our Lord, who has created all, who has created man from a cell, read, because your Lord is most generous. He taught you to write. He taught man what man knew not. That's the 96th surah of the Quran, which always precedes works of science or research or what have you. It is not something that you find for a cooking recipe, for instance. It is always for something which is to do with the arts and the sciences. It follows by, this is the witness of the humble servant of God, Abdullah meaning servant of God, Ibn al-Samad al-Wanshini, that's the name of the guy, dated on the 20th Safar 1098 of the Hijra. That is end of the 17th century, beginning of the 18th century for us. Praise be the one who has led us to this discovery, without which no one would have been able to discover it. The translation I'm giving is pretty literary. Sometimes it doesn't make much sense, but that's how it is written. Allah has enlightened the path of science and knowledge. We beg His mercifulness for those who researched the path of Ikra wa Allama bil Kalami, that is, those who read and engaged in the science of writing with the pen, kalam. The first Mudawin al-Musica, the first master of music, was Ishaq al-Mawsili. Ishaq al-Mawsili, then this is not the translation, was very famous Iraqi musician who was born in the north of Iraq, in Mosul, hence the name Mosili, means the Mosulian. According to Abul Faraj al-Isfahani, Abul Faraj al-Isfahani is very well known for having written the famous Kitab al-Hani, which is the book of the songs, which is 11th century, in which we have, it's a kind of a huge dictionary, or rather phone book, in which you have the names of all the musicians, the actors, the poets of the time. So it's very useful. All that we know about medieval Arabian music from the Maghreb, that is Morocco, to the east of Iraq, even Persia, Iran, we know from al-Isfahani. He's also the author of Alf Layla wa Layla, which is the 1001 Nights. Very prolific writer, wrote in Arabic as well as in Farsi. In his Kitab al-Hani fil Juj al-Atasya Safa 54, it is said, this is a bit complicated. Hussein ibn Yahya had said that Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, after he had finished composing his Sawtiq al-Liman Sadda at-Tiban, Ibrahim ibn al-Mahdi knew about it. Now, to make it a bit, I will continue and then explain what it means more. He wrote to him asking for more details. Ishaq al-Mawsili answered saying that Shirihi, Basetihi, Ikaihi, Wabuihi, Wamajrahu, Tajiatihi, Aksamihi, Makharij, Nahamihi, Makadihi, Al-Wahiri, Mawadi, Makadihi. It means that, what happens? This guy composes a piece of music with words. He writes it down on a sheet of paper, what have you, and he sends it to someone which is further away, and then this one in question receives it and is able to play the music that is notated. That is what it says. And the other guy says, well, I have received it, and I'm able to play what I have received. And Ibn al-Hadi was able to decipher and play the new Sawtiq. Sawtiq, it's a piece of music of Ishaq al-Mawsili, which astonished the latter, proving the efficiency of his musical notation. Ishaq even preferred Ibrahim's interpretation to his, although it was him who had composed it initially. Their contemporary was a savant and philosopher of the Arabs and Muslims, the famous physician, astrologue, theoretician, and musician Abdu Yusuf ibn Ishaq al-Kindi. The famous al-Kindi, who was one of the great theoreticians of medieval music in the Arab world, who survived in the Latin as Kindius. Because, of course, with the Crusades, we decided to Christianize every Arab infidel, so to make it more more acceptable to the good Roman Catholic Church. So he used another method. Al-Kindi used another method based on the Arabic alphabet for the transcription of notes. He limited the measure values, the melodic sets and rhythms from the starting point of the mutlaq al-wadar al-awal, or the free plucked string. The free plucked mutlaq al-wadar means when you pinch, you pluck string without any fingers on the fretboard. That's mutlaq al-wadar. The disciple of al-Madrasa al-Muniya was Mawsiliya ibn Nafya, nicknamed Ziryab. The famous Ziryab was quite a character. He was playing music at the court of Baghdad, but he was so good and he was so nice looking guy and very flirtatious that the Khalif told him, okay, out, you go in exile, I'm sending you to Spain. He thought he was punishing the poor Ziryab. The Ziryab actually was quite happy in Spain because in the surroundings he had Muslim, he had friends, he had Christian friends, he had Jewish friends. Anyway, it worked very well for him and became extremely popular. And introduced not only innovations in music, but also in fashion. He was the first one who introduced short hair in Spain, and this is where it became popular then after in our medieval courts in Europe. It was him who introduced the fork. So from this time onwards, so we used forks at the table. And he was a fashion guru with a nice cap jalabia, not the awful ones they had before, and designed jewelry, spoke poetry, knew his wines, knew everything, and he was known to know by heart 10,000 songs, which is perhaps a bit exaggerated, but during those times this is what was said currently when somebody was very clever. It was emphasized. He knew 10,000 songs, meant he knew many songs. It is not to be taken literally. So this Ziria, called Ziria, meaning the black bird, why? Because he had very dark hair probably, began to teach, and he started to color the strings of the oud. So from the base one it was black, then you had the white, the blood red colored, the violet red, and the yellow strings. He gave them the name of mim in Arabic, the letter mim representing, it was the initial letter of mutlaq al-wadar, that is the string which is plucked without any fingers on the instrument. Now, something important about this letter mim straight away is that in Arabic it is written like this. So immediately we have a relation with music. Now, with a growing number of students here, I needed to give further information about the strings, and decided to mark dots on the 5 strings which he wrote on the board. So we had to start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, and he started to indicate the knot of the lute and place points in there, whatever. But these points, he decided to make them thus. Okay. But it was not a straight development. First, he decided to speak about the time values, and he decided that the longest time value, the full note, the whole note, ronde in French, would be called doron, which in Arabic means the pearl and the planet. Why? Because al-Kindi was the first guy who discovered the spherical propagation of sound. Most scholars at the time imagined the sound like water. If you throw a stone in water, that it goes with the ripples like this, and that was the way it was in the atmosphere. Al-Kindi thought it was a spherical propagation. And of course he was proven right. So he called the longest note the doron. Doron is the pearl and the planet. And he decided to divide it in 4. So you had certain units of length, which was of course 3/4, other units which was half, and other units which were simply 1/4. It was not very satisfactory, but he called them tanini, 1 tanini, half a tanini, 1/4 tanini, and so forth. Despite praises from Abdurrahman At-Tani, who was a famous musicologist to Ziria, this method didn't seem to satisfy him very much. So he decided to use a symbol which could at the same time have the pitch value and time values. So he decided to go back to the meme, which he decided to color. And when in Arabic you color the inside of mim, it becomes nokta. Right? Nokta in Arabic, with a qa, which is very difficult to pronounce for non-Arab speakers, is often eluded it's an illusion which happens, such as we have it in Lebanon or in Egypt, and it's pronounced finally Nutta. So of course immediately impossible to think about Nutta. Remember that the Latin for note is punctus and not nota. And therefore the Latin has nothing to do with the way in which nota came. Notation happened later. Did it come from note, from punctus? I don't think so. But it could be highly probable that it came from nukta. And in Arabic to this day, to play the lute is to play the point, nakt. Nakt means to play the lute, to play the point, to play the notes. So there's an etymology here which is interesting. So the symbol mim in black indicated that one must pluck the first string free without a finger placed on the board. Mim in white for the second string, mim in red blood for the third string, mim in violet red for the fifth string, and mim in yellow for the fifth. And then he decided to mention the other fingers. Sababa, Wusta, Binsir, Khinsir are the names of the fingers in Arabic. So to place this finger, the index finger, is Sababa, Wusta, this finger, Binsir, Khinsir. And he used these signs in order to indicate the fingers on the strings. Mim at the beginning to indicate mutlaq al-watar, free string. Sababa on the first fret, Wusta, Binsir, Khinsir. So the text says that he was not satisfied by this, it was a bit confusing, so he dropped this practice. And indeed we note that it is not very practical. So he came back progressively with thinking about the division of the pearl, and he came back to the mim, and then he was enlightened by a practice in Saudi Arabia that the musicians used to beat the tempo with a stick, and that the leading musician, who was the conductor, if you want, ornated this stick with the beak of an eagle. So if you can imagine a stick with which you give the tempo and you have the beak of an eagle. So this for him was okay, and that's, and this, and this. So this was an indication about the further divisions of the notes. So it was going from this type of writing music to another type of writing. He didn't know exactly which direction. He abandoned the system. As I said before, this system was not satisfactory, so he gave it up. He simply kept the name of Tanini to indicate 4 Taninis, 3 Taninis, 2 Tanini, and 1 Tanini. And in today's music practice, we still use the Tanini, tan, 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 Tanini, Tanini, and so forth. So we use this to indicate different rhythms, as we use mnemotechnic sentences to remember specific rhythms of poetry to be sung, like Mustafilun, Failatun, and so forth. And you make combination of these different words in order to memorize the cycle of arud, which is a cycle of rhythms in poetry. Then Imbaja, who was born in Zaragoza, who was named by the Christians Abem Pache, in order to make him a good Christian of a very bad Muslim, wrote a poem about this. He said, "I swear that I heard in my cradle about a cosmic orb who chose the mim as its half and gave birth to 2 selfish daughters, each of them giving two on crutches, followed by double crutches and quadruple crutches which ran behind them. Thus is the story of writing. Repeat it as you go." So it describes a very nice little poem about how it happened. Then there were many more researchers. Ibn Baja decided to represent the silence with the letter S in Arabic, sin, which is this letter, which is the initial letter of sukun. Sukun meaning silence, which is the harakat, movement in Arabic, in the Arabic language. If you have, for instance, a B in Arabic, and if you put a sukun on it, it means that it is unvoweled, but without anything. If you want to make it sound, you've got ba here, or B, or with this one, boo. And if you want the long boo, it's going to be like this. If you want the long ba, it's going to be like this. And if you want the long B, it's going to be like that. Okay. But the sukun means you have no sounds given onto it. It's unvoiced. Now, he chose the silence and then he decided to think about clefs. And clefs, of course, as we know, are important. These are the sukuns and the silences. And he decided to think about clefs to be given in front of the stave, which he would have invented from the 5 strings. Now, you might say to me, haha, but this is more tablature than it is notation. But I will show you that, in fact, it started as tablature but ended as notation. Now, the letter, the first one we see, fa, is quite simple, the Arabic letter, which is called fa. The sad lam here, sad, this is the letter sad in Arabic, and lam here, is pronounced sul. And this is do. So, fa, sul, do. Very simply. We are taught in our Western education that this clef would be the old-fashioned way of writing G, that this was the old way of writing F, and that this was, we don't have an explanation. At least here we have an explanation. Fa is the letter fa. It is not, it is written more like this than like that. This was an ending fa. The Arabic letters are written differently if they're isolated at the beginning of a word, in the middle of the word, or at the end of the word. So isolated, this would be more like this. The sul, that's more in Maghrebi writing. This would be more like classical writing nowadays, and the do of Maghrebi writing, Moroccan writing. And this would be more the classical way of writing it. Now, when we have the difference between tablature and notation is that Ziria decided to have, as we know, it is, by the way, Ziria who introduced the 5th string of the lute. Before him, we only had 4 strings. He added a string in the middle, very much like the mese in Greek terminology, the central string. And at the beginning, he decided to have the nut, which is the beginning of the instrument, and he showed frets. But one thing which is immediately interesting is that he places the clef here. So straight away, it is then when he separates from the tablature, because you do not need the clef for a tablature. You've got the strings, then you do not need to indicate. So straight away, he mentions this. He places the clef. Then, what he does, which is most interesting, is that he places the dots on the frets. So for anybody who knows to play a fretted instrument, you never place your finger on the fret, you play your finger between the frets. So it tells us that these were fret marks and not physical frets, and that the bars here determine the position of the finger. So we go back to tablature. So you see, this is what I'm saying. He jumps from tablature to notation, to state notation. But you will see later that it is really notation that he meant. Now, these are a few. You see, for instance, here, it is quite clear that we are dealing here with notation. I didn't manage to make any sense of it, but it's obvious when you have this. It is definitely notation more than it is literature. This would need to be analyzed a bit more, but as I didn't tell you earlier, what happened with this text is as soon, and I forgot to tell you the sad story. We go back to Fez in 1982, when we have just discovered this text. We translated it, and then I leave Morocco to go back to England. We are now in 89, and my friend al-Wanshini dies. He dies from a terrible lung cancer, which attacked one lung and then both lungs. His house, now empty, his private home where he entertained his friends, is left empty. Thieves steal everything in the house, including a vast collection of musical instruments, of manuscripts, and this Louha. For many years I didn't feel that I could speak to his daughter or his brothers and so forth, and I couldn't face it. But at a conference in Leiden some years ago, in 2009, colleagues of mine said, well, you are the only one to have the copy of the Louha of al-Wanshini, could you please publish it, because we need to know its contents. And finally I decided that I would publish it. I spoke to Abderrahman's daughter, who was a very pleasant person, and to Abderrahman's brothers, who are medical doctors also, and they gave me permission and encouraged me to present this Louha. This is what I'm doing today. I also presented this document at the Sorbonne University some 5 years ago, and where it was also well received. Now you see an example of the position of the fingers on the frets, or would I say fret marks, which makes things a bit clearer. But we find always here this ambiguity. Do we note music this way or that way? So straight away we got the impression that it is essays, it is trials to have something which will be extremely practical. You see here also he tries at having other designs for the clefs. He doesn't know really what to, which direction he must take for this. He's got on the right the fa, top right, very clearly, and then he has other designs which we do not understand really. So my problem, having showed you this document, is as follows. Is it a fake or not? Well, at the beginning everything tends to say that it would be a fake. But why make a fake which has actually no value at all? Why should one take all this bother to make a fake which doesn't represent much? What is new here? What is controversial? Nothing special. It is not. It's proving that Jesus never existed, or that the great green snake was in fact the creator of this universe. So for me, if there was some money, if there was money involved, I would be inclined to say, okay, yes, only try to make a fake. Also, the fact that this document, this manuscript, this Louha, dates from the 17th century, doesn't make much sense. If you want to make a fake of the 12th century, no, 10th century. And this would have been very possible, because in Fez, there is a remarkable library at the Cairo University and Mosque, which has invaluable manuscripts from all the Arab world on all possible subjects. The other alternative, it could be somebody who would be absolutely, innocent, but would have heard of something which was not innocent. and he might have been encouraged to write down something which was not bona fide piece of however, one thing which is very strange is that all the elements that we find in this Louha are known in different texts, but in fragments. So we know, for instance, that all the dramatis personae in this Louha are people that we know very well from other texts. So this guy obviously was aware of these manuscripts, and these manuscripts do not mentioning al-Isfahani, mentioning al-Kindi, mentioning others than Ibn Sina. These manuscripts do not exist in Fez. They exist in the Middle East. He must have known about it from, I don't know how. The only one scholar a few scholars in Baja of Saragossa was known because he was from Spain. Ziriam stayed quite a few years in Spain, so this would have been possible. But the others, it would not have been possible. You would not have been able to know them. So we have a lot of problems with it. Obviously, all the bits of treatises from al-Kindi are known from other manuscripts. Would an humble little guy living in northern Morocco in the end of the 17th century, beginning of the 18th century, had the possibility of traveling to Iraq, to Damascus to find all this? I think it's very unlikely. And if he'd traveled all these distances, he would have been able to mention other scholars too. But he only mentioned a few theoreticians, not everybody. So this is extremely confusing. And finally, I cannot make my own decision about the fact that it might be a fake or not. So this is the big question: fake or not? As there's what does it bring? Is it really? For instance, the fact that he called his notes do, ro, mi, fa, sol, la, si, di could be an alternative etymology to the hymn to St. John, who said ut quiant laxis, resona fibris, mira gesturum, fa moniturum, solve pulpi, labiratum, sante Johannes. The hymn to St. John starts by ut. It's quite difficult to sing ut, re, mi, re, ut, mi, re, re, ut. Of course, but why should have the Italian monks decided to replace ut by do? There's no reason. It could have been anything else. Mo, why not? Po, why not? Why do? The last verse of the hymn to St. John is Sancte Johannes. It is not si, it's sa. But certain pretend that it's S plus J, and J in German is pronounced like E, therefore C. But it makes no sense. And furthermore, the hymn of St. John, in the early notation of the time of Guido d'Arezzo, who would have invented this, the C was not sung because this interval from Do to Si was not recognized. It was only recognized later in theory. So therefore it was Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, and there was no C. It was the hexachord which worked. So if we have in Arabic Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si, Di, we know, on the other hand, that in the 7th century in Europe, it was CD, CD, the last Do. It was not Do, the last note, it was D. And it is progressively that it became Do because of the octave relationship. Now, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si, Di has a meaning, a mnemotechnic meaning in Arabic. It means Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si, Di. The pearl I have divided some. So straight away we have something which is structured. You know, we have a sense given to the whole lot. And Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si, Di. Like for instance, for the name of the clefs, we say Fa, Sol, La, Do, Re. He divided the pearl. Fa, Sol, La means to cut, to divide. Fa, Sol, La, Do, Re. He divided the pearl. Fa, Sol, Do. So we have something which makes sense. So there would be an indication that this might not be a fake after all, and we might have the origin of the name of the notes through this document. But there are other things which are also very interesting. Is that Ziriam not only uses do, ro, mi, fa, sol, la, si, di, but he couples them and he says do, ro, it's tone, mu, fa, it's semitone, sol, la, ton, la, si, don, and si, di, semitone. So straight away he uses also these terms to indicate the position in the scale set of C, the implacement of semitones. Mu, fa, si, di. So we're getting more and more little bits of information in favor of this document not being a fake at all. But in this type of research, we can only confirm the authenticity of a document if we have another one similar somewhere. And this one is unique, so therefore it remains as it is. You can simply mention that this document exists, but it has no academic value as it stands like this. It can only make us think that there might be an alternative source for music, for having the 5 line stave, for the clefs, for the name of the notes, for the division, the spatial-temporal division of music, and so forth. So this is all in your hands. Now we can discuss the subject a bit further and see what is your opinion about it.
But we have an alliteration present there. To me indicates definitely human origin and not a fictitious human origin. Alliteration is, let's say, the normal way to play with signifiers. Yeah. But it does make sense. Anything which has alliteration in it is not a fabrication as such, a kind of synthesis, but definitely pure pleasure coming out.
Which I totally agree with, yes.
Let me say I have no problem with that being a fret mark or the fret itself, because the note is defined, its length, the string is defined by the fret. So whether you put your fingers behind the fret or not, is a record of what you do. That is perfectly okay.
Yes. And the problem was always about the frets. You see that the word fret in Arabic is called distan. Distanio, the plural. But it is not clear because it's a term which is Iranian originally. And it is not clear if distan is a fret mark or a physical fret. And there has been a lot of confusion in treatises of musicology, notably with Farmer, who really thought that distan was a physical fret, that is a bit of gut tied on the neck of the instrument. Well, I'm more and more certain that the distan was a fret mark that was used to help, at the beginning, students to put their fingers in the right position.
But do all stringed instruments that they play have frets? I mean,
Frets are fret marks.
Well, not a violin doesn't have frets.
No, exactly.
Where the note comes, it's immaterial.
No, it's not that matter. There's another problem there with the frets. You see, we find that when music is composed and played, accepted within an authoritative ruler, he imposes frets on the instruments because all has to be regulated. And when you have so you had frets probably at a certain period, but on the tamburo you have frets, physical frets.
Yeah.
But when you get your freedom with the oud and you go to Moorish playing, the frets disappear.
Yeah.
It means that you are allowed to make much more sensual, melodic little niceties that you would not be allowed to do in under an orthodoxic rule, such as the one that we had in Baghdad at the same time. So yes, the frets have got their importance. The guitar, which brass in Spanish under a strict Roman Catholic rule, has frets. There's no doubt. You cannot not have frets, okay? Because everything has to be perfectly regulated, especially music, because music We don't realize this as much today, but music is something which is heard mainly in the church. And has to be really, really seriously done. And all the popular music which is played comes from the church. They use Gregorian or so-called Gregorian music on which they place other words and other rhythms. But all comes from the church, so the music really needs to be regulated at the church. It's extremely important. And the way to regulate music at the time is not with a synthesizer, it's not with, it is really with frets. These are the frets which will put order in the world.
Is it possible that the clef in the notation of fa, sol or do could have had some implications for tuning, either the positioning of the frets or the tuning of the strings at all? Or is there any precedent for that?
Well, I don't think so. I think he was trying to find a way when you have the 5 strings and you put a clef, if it is a temperature, it makes no sense, because each string has got its pitch and series of notes coming from it, from the frets. So the clef is irrelevant. The clef becomes useful at the transition between tablature to notation. Yes, in this case it is. But before, no, you do not need to have clefs.
In Western music, you would say this is a soprano, that clef.
Yes.
Because this is a soprano recorder. Yes. You like tenor recording, you have a different clef. So does that hold good?
He was going there, he was getting there, there's no doubt. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he was going somewhere. He was trying this is Zialia through al-Wanshini was trying he was guessing, he was attempting, he was making experimentations, and these finally managed to make their way through Europe. I suppose this is what happened, and finally, later in the 16th, 17th century, finally became reality. But it was a long progress. And also there's a thing, is that in the Arab tradition, the Arab tradition of music is mainly oral, so there's no need of notation. And I think the reason why this system didn't prosper, didn't have its evolution, is simply because there was no need for it. And Ziaria was not a theoretician per se. He was a musician who wanted to communicate his playing skills. If had this been left in the hands of theoreticians, he would have evolved it and it would never been used in praxis. This means straight away that it is for praxis. It is something which is tangible. It is not ethereal. But it raises many questions.
At the time of the late 17th, early 18th century, when this manuscript appeared, was there an interest in notation?
Yeah. No, not in Where? That's
somewhere in the Arabic music world. If there wasn't a need for notation in the old
times. There was the only
times.
notation which existed from the 12th century was like in Greek, was an alphabetical notation above or under the text, like which became later pneumatic notation. Pneumatic for nomad, the sign or the breathing, I don't know which is the proper Greek root for this. It could be both.
Whereas by that time in Western Europe there was a need for notation because of the appearance of harmonic polyphony.
Yes.
So you needed to organize yourself with different ranch singers, and each had to have their part written down, and then you had to rehearse them as well.
Yes, indeed. In the Arab world, which remains monodic music, that is one melodic line. It's horizontal reading, horizontal playing, which is wrong. Music is never horizontal, but from the way in which we notate music is horizontal. And why? Because the sophistication of the intervals was absolutely certainly not possible to notate at that time. It was out of the question. is far too much sensual, and depending on rules which are far more ethereal, making it virtually impossible at that time to make any notation possible.